The first parak of Kiddushin is basically about kinyanim. The kinyan is an act of acquisition. The act is used to acquire things that you actually own. It's also used to acquire shibudim, which are obligations, responsibilities. For example, in the case of marriage, you don't actually acquire the woman; you acquire certain responsibilities are created between the two sides of the marriage. Now, this parak specifically deals with a number of different acquisitions. What are these acquisitions? We start off with the acquisitions of Kiddushin. Then we go that's marriage. We get to the acquisitions of avodim, slaves, how to acquire property, how to acquire movable objects, and then of course we get into a huge side discussion, talking about different mitzvahs. Also, there's an extensive Gemara that goes through the source that which mitzvahs women are obligated to perform. A bunch of other things that and round out the first parak. Second parak talks about shlichus, using a messenger. So the beginning of the first parak deals extensively with Kiddushin, and then of course we transition into avodim, which is about 5-6 plots in about 2 weeks from now, I believe, and then we go all over the place. We go to acquiring land, acquiring movable objects, etc. Let's begin the first Mishnah. A woman is acquired in 3 ways. Obviously, this means her. One more last point she should bring, which we obviously mentioned many times before, which would be the understanding between Kiddushin and Nisuin. So what's Kiddushin and what's Nisuin? Kiddushin is the erison. Same words. It creates a marital obligation, but without the marital privileges. They don't live together yet, but they're obligated to each other, and they're obligated to consummate that relationship at some later point. Violating Kiddushin or erison is the same capital punishment as violating the marriage itself. We call it an engagement. It's clearly not an engagement. It's much more of a marriage than an engagement is. And that's the first step of Kiddushin. Nisuin is sort of consummating the relationship. How is that done? There's 2 main components of how that's done. Number 1 is to bring her into your domain. This is something like a chuppah or yichud room, or literally to live with her, to be secluded with her, whether or not they're actually intimate or not, or otherwise. Okay. A woman could be acquired with 3 ways. She acquires herself with 2 different methods. How do you give Kiddushin? 3 ways. The first one is kesef. You give an item of value. How much value? We'll get to it in a moment. Bishtar is you give a document. The document is useless and worthless. It just says it's the same thing as a divorce. It just says the opposite of divorce. You're married to me with this document. Ubibiya, or with an intimate relationship that's engaged in for the sake of Kiddushin. We'll soon see that this is not a recommended practice. We'll get to it in about a week and change. Okay, the kesef with an item of value. B'shamay says how much value? But dinner or b'shava dinner. You need 1 dinner, or the equivalent amount. What do you say? Something that has the value of 1 dinner. Basil says b'pruta u'b'shava pruta. With a pruta is a copper coin, or shava pruta is something equal to the copper coin. The kamahi pruta, how much is this copper coin? If you take a silver isser and you divide it up into 8ths, you get these 8 copper coins. 1 of those copper coins is sufficient for Kiddushin. The koine etzatzma beget u'b'misas habal. She acquires herself with the divorce or with the death of the husband. A yavama is acquired with an intimate relationship. The koine etzatzma, she acquires herself with chalitza, or b'misa yavam if all the potential yavamin die, maybe there's 1, maybe there's more than 1, then she acquires herself, and she can marry whoever she pleases. Like Rashi points out, Maimer, which is sort of like a Kiddushin, is not actually a kinyan. Maimer is sort of a person who wants to do Yibam. They give him Maimer Kiddushin first, but it's a rabbinical Kiddushin. It does not have any severity. Okay. Ha'isha niknes, a woman is acquired. Ma'ishna hocha l'tani ha'isha niknes, ma'ishna hosan l'tani ish mekadesh. Why over here does the Mishnah? Okay, so the first parak talks about a woman being acquired. The second parak talks about the same thing, but from the male perspective. It says haish mekadesh, and the question is, the language is different. What are we talking about? Are we talking about here a kinyan or kiddushin or a kiddushin? Obviously, it's the same thing we're talking about. But why is the terminology used different? Why over here do we use the word kinyan, acquisition, and in the next parak we use the word mekadesh? Kiddushin. Because one of the ways to acquire for a woman to receive Kiddushin is through kesef, an item of value. Okay, the kesef, and what's the source of the item of value? How do we know that you can marry a woman using an item of value? Gomra kicha misayafra. We learn out from the Avram Avinu buying the field from Ephron. Yet you bought a cemetery, which is a very interesting observation. Why marriage is learned out of buying a cemetery. Very there's a lot of depth there. There's a lot of very deep things going on here. Okay, rather than the woman's womb, what's that called? What's the word in Hebrew for a woman's womb? It's two different words. One is called a rechem. The other one is called a kever, which is a tomb. Okay, same word. Okay. Just to whet your appetite. There's a lot of depth going on here. Why this is the words? Okay, it says when a person is getting married, if a person acquires to acquire, when Avram Avinu is buying the cemetery from Ephron, what does he buy? I'm giving you the money of the field. Take it, acquire it on my behalf. The kicha ikra kinyan, and we see here that kicha, this acquiring, is called a kinyan. The chsiv, as the verse states, hasada asher kana Avram. When we talk about the field that Avram bought, he took it, meaning kach, and what do we call that? Asher kana, he acquired it. It was a kinyan. Alternatively, if we know that Avram Avinu bought a field with a cemetery in it, what does it say? Sadais bekesef yiknu. It says that the fields with money will be acquired. Kinyan. So because we see that the word kinyan is used to describe an acquisition, so Tani, the verse, the Mishnah begins with ha'isha niknes, a woman acquires. A woman is acquired. Okay, so fine. Okay, I understand. So we understand why the word kinyan is used. That's only half the answer, though. What about the flip side? So the second parak begins with ha'ish mekadesh. A man gives kiddushin. What exactly does that kiddushin mean? Why do we use the word mekadesh? Why don't we use the word ha'ish kaina? A man acquires kinyan. So the Gemara says mikara tani lishna d'oraisa. Initially, we use the biblical term, which is kinyan. L'b'sayif tani lishna d'rabbanan. In the end, we use the rabbinical terminology. U'may lishna d'rabbanan. What is the rabbinical terminology? The asur lo akula alma kehektish. You forbid her to the rest of the world like hektish. So, in other words, the Torah says that the Torah calls the creation of an erison kinyan. The rabbis call the creation of an erison kiddushin, and therefore they use the second parak uses the rabbinical term, which is kiddushin, mekadesh. Because why is the word kiddushin used? Because you forbid her. The act of kiddushin is to separate her, to make her forbidden to everybody else and holy to you. Okay. Okay, so now we understand why the word kiddushin is used in the second parak and why the word kinyan is used in the first parak. But why do we frame it differently? In the first parak, we talk about it from the woman's perspective, ha'isha niknes. And in the second parak, we talk about it from the man's perspective, ha'ish mekadesh. So why is that the case? Why isn't the first parak also a man will acquire? Because we wanted to point out the end of the Mishnah, the kainas atzma b'didah, tananami reish b'didah. When we talk about her acquiring herself, we talk about it from her perspective. She acquires herself in two ways, either with the divorce or with the death of the husband. So therefore, the first part of the Mishnah, we talk about the woman's perspective as well. Okay, fine. So let the Mishnah say that the man acquires or gives the woman herself. He's makna. He provides. He releases her from her obligations. So Gemara says, misa sabal. Because one of the ways that the woman acquires herself is through the death of the husband. He doesn't release her. Sort of God releases her. It's not the man doing an act to release her from her obligations. And therefore, we talk about it from the woman's perspective. Another possibility is, we talk about the husband acquiring, we would think that maybe the husband could force a woman to accept Kiddushin. She has to willingly accept the Kiddushin. You cannot force the Kiddushin upon her. Okay, we'll stop here. See you tomorrow.
Wow.
Okay, I'll hopefully try to keep about half an hour to 3/4 of an hour ahead. So that in the future, things, if